When it comes to leadership, particularly Christian leadership, where do you start for that? Apparently there's a bit of a dearth of it in not just in New Zealand, but other parts of the world. There's one thing to be a Christian, it's another thing to be a disciple of Jesus, but taking that next step and moving from discipleship to leadership. Joining me on the program, a leader within his field, head of theology at Laidlaw College, Dr. Myk Habets. Kia ora, good morning.
Kia ora, good morning to you.
It is, I suppose, that's what you do, is make leaders, take fresh minds, bright young things, push some theology into them. Hopefully some of it sticks, and they are the Christian leaders of tomorrow. No pressure, Myk, but don't stuff it up, right?
That's right. A lot of people that come to us are already leaders. Most people are leaders, and even if it's only of themselves, right? But then, we get people, which is fantastic, that have been leading churches, small groups, businesses, and often when they go back to their churches, not that they ever leave them, but when they're in their churches, often the bar's just too low, I guess, is what I want to say. That's a bit negative, but there's so much positives in terms of the Christian faith around our history, where we've not simply been content to convert people, in the old sort of, it's a bit gross, but, another notch on my evangelism belt, I've done one, let's move on to the next. I don't know if anyone's ever grossly done that, but we do tend to have a reputation for evangelizing and then moving on too quickly without discipleship, and then into that next phase of leading others. And what many of us find that have been thrust into leadership is leaders have followers, not mindless disciples that just blindly, but influence because of content, because of personality and the combination of those, because of authenticity. And I'm just not sure we're seeing a rigorous enough approach across a lot of churches for that next step of discipleship into leadership.
I mean, discipleship, of course, is very important. We don't just want a bunch of like elderly baby Christians, as it were. But in some ways, discipleship is following rather than leading. If the only thing that you learn from discipleship is how to be a follower, then how does that naturally transition into you having a group of disciples and being their leader? You think it would work automatically, but of course it doesn't.
Yeah, and the church used to be masters at this. I mean, for centuries, literally, we were leaders in the field where there'd be mentoring, where you'd intentionally have a group of people, you'd be discipling them, and then mentoring them and giving them gifts and giving them some skills, giving them opportunities, doing it in a safe way, incrementally, and then we'd be replicating ourselves. I mean, just one dire statistic is that across almost every church, every denomination in the latest Church Life survey and those other church surveys, within the next 5 years, something like 70% of our pastors, ministers, priests are retiring.
Wow.
And hardly any of those have a succession plan. That's not leadership. That's abandoning the ship.
Exactly. That's worse statistics than GPs. And that's pretty shocking, actually. I mean, what you're describing, I don't mean this in a bad way, Myk, but what you're describing is kind of like a spiritual pyramid scheme. It's kind of like Amway for Jesus, really, isn't it? Now, without the dodgy bits... You're not agreeing with my metaphor.
No, why not? It's replication, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. If we want a better image, it's organic cell replication.
Exactly.
Yeah, you gather people around you. I mean, I'll give you an example, a really good example of a church I'm familiar with, had a guy who was just sold out on this stuff. And so he would gather a group around him, small group. They'd work through 3-4 years of material, biblical stuff, theological life skills, all the rest. And then he would almost make, I mean, I say that in air quotes, but it would strongly encourage them all to then start their own group.
Okay.
Now, they didn't all do it, but half did. And then that half did it again, and half of them did it. Now, 35 years on, that church still has an incredibly healthy core of people who are initiating, mentoring, and then replicating. It's not rocket science, but boy, it works. And I think, didn't Jesus do that? Didn't the disciples do that? The early church did that?
Exactly. And I mean, it may sound like a little bit of top-down command and control, because making people do anything is impossible. I can't even house train a pet. But I suppose this principle of self-replication is, well, not just spiritually, but biologically, the definition of success. If we can replicate who we are and what we know, then even some of the darker aspects of society recognize this as being, well, you're successful then, right?
Yeah, it's the definition of life, I'd argue.
Yeah.
And I know this is only a very limited perspective, but it used to be that that churches and families would typically set apart certain people for the ministry.
Yeah.
They'd say, you've got these giftings, you've got the skill set, they'd tap them on the shoulder, they'd support them through training. Now, I know lots of other vocations, all vocations, we need them all, and absolutely, there's nothing more holy than other, but what we're not finding churches are valuing at all. In fact, hardly any churches that we know from the front are saying, a career, the vocation, the calling of being a pastor, a minister, a priest, is a high calling, and it's a worthy one, and it's fulfilling. It's incredibly difficult, but boy, it's a fulfilling career. Any of you are interested in shoulder tapping, we need to get back to that. We're doing that with doctors, and we're doing that with accountants and lawyers.
Yep.
We're just not doing it with the church. And so where will the leaders of tomorrow be if we're not deliberately trying to encourage them?
There's a couple of problems with that, of course, is actually, if you look towards church leaders, a lot of them are overworked and stressed out and dealing with complaints most weeks. And in some ways, it is a thankless job. In terms of aspirational goals, some people would think, well, I'd like to aim higher than that. The flip side of that, of course, is we end up going with people who might not necessarily be great leaders, but they volunteer. They put their hands up. We go with what we've got because, well, at least they're turning up. But people with the most time available on their hands don't necessarily have the skills required to be the church leaders of the future.
And that's where I think good leadership can find ways to work both through that and around those issues. I think we're in a context where global village, right?
Yeah.
It's no longer simply whatever my little church or my big church, whatever my local church has, that's all I'm stuck with. To be blunt, that's just not the case. The church down the road, the church up the road, the church across, whether it's a denomination or whatever, look, we're the same church. We've just got different names.
Yeah.
And so in our area, for instance, where we are, the churches there are really connecting. The pastors are connecting. We're starting to share resources. We're sharing practical stuff. We're sharing preaching. There are ways to do it that good leaders find. And again, it's our ecclesiology, our doctrine of the church.
Yeah.
It's not up to me. I'm not the Messiah, and my church isn't the savior of the world.
Yeah.
Christ is, and it's his church. I think we are seeing lots of collaboration and lots of creativity around addressing some of those lacks there, and good leaders can find those.
And some healthy cross-pollination in the body of Christ between denominations without compromising core creedal values. Now, I think I know the answer to this, but you could prove me wrong, Myk. If somebody is feeling a sense of calling to leadership, if this is something which they're thinking, you know what, this may be what God is drawing me into, do they need to go to Bible college? Should they all go to the Laidlaw website and sign up immediately? Do good Christian leaders need to have a theological degree, in your opinion?
Good question. I don't think all Christian leaders need a theological degree, like a piece of paper is some magic sort of thing that justifies your ministry. However, in a country like ours, where access to really good theological education is literally as cheap as chips, you can order the course at Laidlaw for $200 or $500 for a whole group.
Yeah.
We can't make it any cheaper than that. I think if we're not accessing those resources, there's something wrong. If someone wants a career, a vocation, if someone really wants to be a responsible leader of others in a country like ours where we have really good theological education available, for them, I'd say yes. They need to take time out. They need to take some sacrifice in order to dig some really deep wells from which they'll be resourcing people for a lifetime of ministry.
And I suppose a challenge beyond that, and maybe we're getting back to the Amway model, I don't know, not sure that's a good thing. However, if you're recognizing somebody within your church community or even somebody within your family who has those types of skills, having a quiet word and saying, you know what, if you would consider taking, I don't know, a couple of papers a semester part-time, be it Laidlaw or somewhere else, then I'd be happy to support you. I'd be happy to be your sponsor, to encourage you through that. Then honestly, just that having a quiet word, coming alongside, financially supporting people, that would be a great investment for churches to make in the next generation of leadership.
Yeah, and we know that from history. That is a significant investment, and it has significant payoff. Yeah. I mean, most of us, when we reflect back on our church lives, what are the fond memories? It's the people that we were doing life and faith with, and often at the center of that were a really good group of leaders who had the right gifts and disposition and training in order to lead us to where they were.
Yeah.
I can certainly think of a whole list of people like that, and I'd like to be part of, through Laidlaw, we like to think we're part of building up the next generation that will do that.
Yeah, and hey, just credit where it's due. My employer recognised that and allowed me the grace to be able to study part-time at Laidlaw while continuing to do what I do. And hey, I'm not necessarily a leader within a church, but it's something which has certainly benefited the work that I do on Rhema and myself personally and spiritually as well. Laidlaw.
And look, your sermons reach more people than the average pastor, Andrew. Let's absolutely. Open night tomorrow, Wednesday night, on campus, Henderson.
Okay.
Anyone? Well,
I mean, hey, fun story. That's how my Laidlaw journey started, actually. My wife picked me up from work and says, "We're not going home tonight. I've got a surprise." I thought we were going to a restaurant or a movie. No, we were going to the Laidlaw open night. And hey, as they say, the rest is history.
You may have got a sausage roll if you were lucky.
Well, no, it was a very good sausage roll, Mike. Don't knock the catering team.
And a great education.
Exactly. Laidlaw.ac.nz. Open night tomorrow night. Do check it out and encourage you to prayerfully consider being involved in that or encouraging perhaps a young person in your life to take that step. Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.